Eugenie Sage.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Tēnā koe, and congratulations, Mr Wilson, as being incoming clerk. The Green Party supported the referral of the Environmental Reporting Bill to Select Committee. We did that, but we made it very clear at the time of the first reading that we had significant concerns about the bill, because while it is good to have a regular, consolidated and accurate national level environmental reporting, guaranteed by law, and we'll be catching up with the rest of the OECD, we need to have independent reporting. This bill will certainly bring a measure of consistency and coherence to our very devolved system of environmental decision-making and management, but it is not the real deal on state of the environment reporting because it fails to provide for independent reporting. And we're dealing with a government which has repeatedly increased the powers of ministers and the executive at the expense of a strong and independent public sector, at the expense of local government and at the expense of democratic accountability. It's increased the powers of ministers to direct councils, it's increased ministerial regulation-making powers, it's replaced elected councillors with appointed commissioners, it has abused the provisions of the Official Information Act by manipulating the release of official information and blocking and delaying release for as long as possible. And so where we have something like Clause 18, where the Ministers for Environment and Statistics get to decide the topics on which environmental reporting is to occur, we see that as the latest chapter in National's undermining of local democracy. And it sets the scene for quite Orwellian manipulation of public information and of what the public understands as a state of our environment and what Clean Green New Zealand is really all about. And it's certainly not crude oppositional politics, as the Minister has claimed, to oppose this provision in the bill. The Green Party made quite constructive contributions, we think, to the debate at the Select Committee, which did result in some improvements to the bill in terms of Clause 14, Clause 16 and some of the other clauses. But this Clause 18 is the heart of the bill. We need to know what state our environment is in, the severity of our biodiversity crisis, how water quality is continuing to decline, and what sort of land uses are contributing to that decline. And if state of the environment reporting is to be credible, if it's to be robust, it needs to be independent. And it's not independent because in Clause 18 we've got those regulation-making powers for the Minister for the Environment and the Minister of Statistics. And those powers include prescribing the topics which are to be covered in the domain reports and which are going to be published on a rotating basis every 6 months, and also the topics which are to be in the 3-yearly synthesis reports, the presses which are changing the state of the environment and the impacts that those changes are having. So that gives quite sweeping powers to ministers. They can interfere in and restrict the scope of the matters to be reported on and the types of information which will be relevant. So it's another example of the very centralised decision-making which we're seeing under this national administration. And the Environmental Defence Society, in its submission, and about half of the submissions on this bill opposed these significant powers being given to ministers. The Environmental Defence Society said that it would politicise what should be an independent process. The Parliamentary Commissioner for the Environment highlighted that Clause 18 created the opportunity for political interference. Because if you've got ministers having control over the topics to be reported upon, then you've got that risk of environmental reporting becoming another exercise in spin. And recent history has highlighted that our concerns are real. In 2008, we and the Green Party showed that the Labor government had suppressed the final chapter of the 2007 State of the Environment report. And that suppressed chapter showed that increased car use, dairy intensification and overconsumption were driving environmental decline, and that chapter concluded that regulation was needed to protect the environment and our clean green reputation. Why was it suppressed? Presumably in an attempt to play down the need for both policy and legislative change. So it's happened in the past. where the government has intervened, and with Clause 18 it could happen in the future. So, Mr Speaker, Clause 18 could be amended, and we pushed for amendments at Select Committee so that the topics to be reported on could be set out in a schedule to the bill. The Parliamentary Commissioner could set the topics on her own or in consultation with the Government Statistician and the Secretary for the Environment, or a panel of scientists could set the topics. That was another suggestion that came through in submissions. So we will be promoting supplementary order papers in the committee stages to make some changes to Clause 18 to give that independence and make the bill much more robust. Now, the Minister has sought to justify this ministerial power by saying that because environmental reporting can be expensive in terms of collecting information, it has budgetary implications and therefore it should be within the Minister's domain to set those topics. Well, of course, ministers have a perfect right to set budgets through the whole budget process, so they can take care of those concerns there. And national members have also sought to discount the need for independence here by claiming that it's a parallel with the way financial reporting is done. But, Mr Speaker, the ministers under the Public Finance Act, where you've got GDP and those traditional indicators of economic progress, we're way out of step with what is happening overseas. And if we had the government statistician setting the indicators himself, then there is a potential for those indicators to follow what's happening overseas with a much broader suite of sustainability indicators which show us how the economy is in real terms in terms of the health of the environment, the health of our society. The Green Party's Dr Kennedy Graham has drafted a Public Finance Sustainable Development Indicators Bill which has a much wider suite of sustainable indicators which would be a much better indication of the health of our economy and society, and that bill is in the name of my colleague James Shaw. So the indicators in that bill are set out in the bill rather than requiring ministers to set them. So we've got that problem of very narrow indicators because they're being set by the minister.
Order.
Thank you, Mr Bridges. Another problem with this bill is that there is no regulatory impact statement which analyses the implication of the bill's implementation and what's going to be needed at the local government level to align the reporting which councils do with national environmental reporting, because the bill puts a lot more work on councils, but once again there's no funding being provided by central government to support that. And even the government's own appointed commissioners at Environment Canterbury complained about this. And they said that the new reporting system would require quite considerable input from councils in terms of the practicalities of data gathering, staff time, analysis and interpretation of raw data if you were going to get that consistency. So that's going to have an impact on councils' work programs, and there should be funding provided to assist. So in concluding, I'd like to thank the over 320 submitters on the bill. Their submissions and their analysis have helped the Select Committee to improve the bill, particularly the submissions from the Officers of Parliament, because one useful change that the Select Committee has made is to Clause 16, which was quite a major concern of the Green Party and submitters, because in the bill as introduced, it cut across the statutory responsibilities of the Officers of Parliament, such as the Ombudsman, and their ability to do their work and undertake their investigations. And the changes to Clause 16 also constrain the the non-disclosure provisions which were in the bill as introduced, and ensure that the government statistician is only able to decide to withhold access to untested and unpublished information. So, Mr Speaker, we are opposing this bill because you cannot have credible and robust state of the environment reporting unless that is independent of ministers and the potential for political interference. This bill does not do that because of the problems in Clause 18. Thank you.
Very clear.
Dennis O'Rourke.
Speaker, New Zealand First opposes this bill, and we opposed it at the first reading.